Hi and welcome. My name's Clare Muscutt from UC Today, bringing you the latest news and conversation from the unified communications and collaboration industry. Today's chat is on how speech recognition is accelerating enterprise. And to help me explore this topic, I'm joined by Michael Lawder, Chief Experience Officer at ASAPP. Michael, thanks for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So by way of introduction, Michael, can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at ASAPP?
Yeah, sure. So I actually grew up in Texas and started working at Apple not long after Steve Jobs returned in the late 90s as a
Wow.
call center agent. So my career in this industry, in the customer experience industry, began on the ground floor talking to customers. And I found out two things about myself that I didn't know. I really love helping people and I love solving really hard problems. And so that really fueled my career. And I led service and experience organizations over the last 20 years at Apple, EA, the video game company, and Samsung the last 5 years. And when I was at Samsung, I was introduced to ASAPP. I fell in love with the product. It was one of those transformational experiences where a company was actually delivering what it promised in terms of innovating the customer experience. Started advising the company earlier this year and joined as their first chief experience officer a couple of months ago. And so my role is really focused on a few things. One is these types of conversations around thought leadership and evangelizing ASAPP. I'm also very involved in supporting go-to-market, customer success, the sales teams, et cetera. And I'm just having a blast. I love it.
Wow, that's some experience. As a CX professional myself, I'm quite jealous of of your CV. What amazing companies and what an amazing time to have seen that explosion, which is probably a great lead into my first question, really, which is basically the last 30 years or so have been so disrupted by advancing technology. And I think personally, customer experience is really struggling to keep up with the technology as it's arriving. What do you see as the driving force behind needing to evolve at pace now and in the future?
I think in some ways to answer that question, you have to go back in the past and sort of figure out how we got here. And I think that the customer experience business actually isn't that old. It's probably call centers really began in force maybe 35 years ago. And even today, most of the way we operate call centers and contact centers and experience businesses is based on cost. So how can we reduce cost, whether it's by finding cheaper labor somewhere else or by somehow providing information to customers that prevent them from having to contact a company. And so this is kind of, in my opinion, a flawed premise, this idea of hiring hundreds of people, giving them a couple of weeks of training and unleashing them as the voice of your brand, probably not, the greatest way to build a business around loyalty and retention and creating an awesome customer experience. So that's sort of a framing of sort of how we got here. And I think one of the things we need to do to keep pace and really meet our customers where they are is first understand that our customers are comfortable in places talking to their friends and family in places other than the telephone. So really across the globe, we've seen customers adopt messaging and chat and different ways of interacting with companies and with their friends and family far more than they talk on the telephone. I have a 16-year-old daughter who has had a smartphone for maybe 5 or 6 years. She's never used it to make a phone call. It's just not how she operates. And I think companies have had a hard time adapting to that. And so, I think right now it's really an opportunity to use real transformative technology to meet customers where they are, create a really seamless, frictionless experience, and really, deliver, on the promise of building loyalty and retention, which I believe is one of the most important things as a customer experience leader.
There's so much we can learn from 16-year-olds, right?
But I learn something every day. Not always good, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you're so right. The point of meeting the customer where they want to be met rather than forcing them down channels, and certainly messaging services is transformative, I think, for the industry, also for the customer. So I'm with you on that one. So what extent do you think mobile technology is influencing the consumer and their expectations of communicating with service providers, leading on from what you just said?
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, every 95% of the globe, has access or has a smartphone. It's a supercomputer in their pocket. Most web traffic now is happening on mobile devices. Ironically, even at most companies, 80 or 90% of people that call are calling from this incredible supercomputer that's in their pocket. And so it's kind of ironic to me that they have this digital supercomputer in their pocket. They're using using it to interact with this very analog experience on the telephone. And then companies like ASAPP are then digitizing it back by real-time transcription and augmenting and automating the experience for the agents and the customers. And so, yeah, the rise of the smartphone and of mobile communication really has changed the game. And in fact, 10 years ago in the United States, messaging on mobile devices became the primary mode of communication for the United States, took over the telephone. And so, unfortunately, companies haven't caught up, and we're still seeing 80 or 90% of interactions with companies happening on a traditional telephone.
Wow.
And so we've got to find a way to change that. The mobile phone is an incredible way to deliver an omni-channel experience, one that's super interactive and multimodal. So you can even have a voice conversation or a digital conversation and interact with content and other information all on one device at the same time. And that's really what mobile technology gives us the opportunity to do.
Yeah, I just reflecting on when you said there, I bought an iMac the other day that I'm using right now, and it's not as powerful as my phone.
Yeah.
In terms of like memory and everything. Like, I'm shocked.
my daughter will sit in front of the television, which is this big screen television, with her smartphone in front of her, watching TV on her smartphone. I'm like, what are you doing? You have this huge television on the wall. And it's just become the tool for this generation and the generation coming up, the millennials, Gen Zs, et cetera. It's not even really in fact, when I talk to her about mobile technology, she just thinks it's technology. It's how she grew up. It's how she thinks. And I think that's what, as people who are involved in the CX business, we have to be thinking like they think. In the United States, Claire, the majority of customers in an install base are millennials, and soon will be a combination of millennials and Gen Z. And so they're just a different strategy and a different approach. And I think, as we discussed earlier, meeting them where they are and kind of understanding this new era of how we communicate and work, even with the pandemic, and the fact that we have 300 million people using Zoom every day, this is fundamentally changing, along with generational cohorts changing, how we communicate with our customers.
Yeah, and that will lead us perfectly into my next question. But I just have one quick reflection there as well. So I'm technically Xennial, so on the cusp of Gen X and Millennial. So I do remember when times were analog, and I had a pager like when I was a teenager. I was one of the first people in my whole school that got, the first very kind of primordial Nokia mobile phone. You could play Snake and make your own ringtones and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's easy to forget sometimes now that, there are whole generations that are becoming the highest spending power who don't remember any of that. It's just always been this way for them. So I think you're right. And I'm moving into what you were just talking about there, the shifts that we've seen in communication from the pandemic. How speech recognition technology more broadly helping employees to adapt to the changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, most contact center agents, when the pandemic hit, moved to remote locations, their homes, to do their job. Contact centers are pretty, dense, places, and I would say pretty high risk when the pandemic hit. And so all across the globe, we had agents going home. And so immediately you lost the ability to walk to the lab, the ability to tap your neighbor on the shoulder, the ability to collaborate with your manager on solving a problem. And so suddenly, the technology was needed to replace those things. And it's very difficult. While I think a lot of people, Claire, when everybody moved home, they thought, this is fantastic. We have this remote business, and now they're sitting at home, and it's cheaper for us, and we're still able to operate. I think that's true short term, but I think long term, technology is going to be needed to be able to create the same kind of experience you would have, in a physical location remotely. So, speech recognition and technology in particular, can help in a couple ways. One of the things that ASAPP does is it's literally listening to the call or the chat or messaging interaction, and in the case of the call, it's transcribing the call in real time. And then whether it's a chat or a call, once that's transcribed, it's actually pulling information from the actual words the customer and the agent are typing, and basically providing guidance and support to the agent on how best to solve it. One of the things we say is, ASAP makes every agent your best agent. And so it takes the things that the best agents are doing, how they're performing tasks, what knowledge they're using, et cetera, and kind of replicates that tap on the shoulder and allows, every agent to be able to deliver a consistently good experience to customers. And to me, I think that's a really important requirement in general in contact centers and in customer experience, but it's just become even more important with the pandemic.
No, absolutely agree with you. And I think what you were talking about there, as a non-technical person that's in CX that's becoming more technical, I know that the latest buzzword is asynchronous communication, but for the benefit of the audience, me and anyone else out there who isn't that au fait with the buzzwords, could you explain the term a little more and what it means for the future of customer experience, please?
It's so funny. It's so funny you asked that. My wife was literally telling me this morning, she's like, when you first started saying asynchronous, she's like, I knew what it meant, but I didn't really understand what it meant in the context of what you do. And so it's one of those silly. The CX world has a lot of buzzwords. In fact, things like omni-channel and digital transformation, and sometimes they don't live up to their promise. So asynchronous is really any conversation you're having that is not, not happening at the exact. In a session-based environment. So a telephone is a synchronous conversation. The traditional live chat where you've got the open bubble and the agent is sort of disconnecting you if you don't respond within 2 minutes. That is more of a synchronous conversation. Asynchronous is the best example of it is a WhatsApp or a messaging experience where you can ask, you can say something to your friends or family, put your phone back in your pocket, and a couple hours later, you can pick it up and respond again. So there's no live, real-time synchronous interaction. The reason it's so important is that, number one, it's a way better experience. If you've ever interacted with a company through, say, a messaging channel asynchronously, you can ask, it's kind of like the promise of email. So email always had the promise of, I can write a company an email, I can put my phone back in my pocket, go about my day, and then when I look at it again, they've given me the perfect answer. The problem with email is it takes a long time to get a response, and oftentimes the response is not valid because some back and forth interaction is required, so you end up wasting a lot of time. So this is, in the messaging world, asynchronous is a way to ask a question. As a customer, put your phone in your pocket, come back later. If you need to provide more information, you can do it on your time. So we often say, that customers never wait. This is what we say at ASAPP. Customers never wait, and agents are always busy. And I think that's the power of asynchronous. The challenge is contact centers are not used to operating in an asynchronous environment. All of the tools and algorithms that are used to, for example, to do workforce management inside a contact center are based on synchronous conversations, whether it's chat or phone. And so if you can imagine me asking a company a question and then 5 hours later asking another question or providing another response, it may not even be the same agent that's interacting. And so all of the ways in which you operate, the KPIs used to measure the customer experience, all of that has to change. But the beauty and persistence and convenience of asynchronous, or really being able to communicate in these messaging channels where we talk to our friends and family, Claire, I think is so powerful. The idea that I can have a conversation with a giant, monolithic company in the same place I talk to my friends and family, and in the same way, I think is really transformational, and it's something we really believe in at ASAPP. By the way, operationally, it provides incredible efficiencies to the business. And so these are, I call them silver bullets, these things that we can do, these single things we can do that deliver a much better experience at a lower cost. They're rare. Normally we're spending more money to improve the customer experience, or spending less money and the customer experience goes down a little bit. And this opportunity to meet customers where they are, deliver this great experience, and make the operations themselves more efficient, reduce costs in the P&L, is a really, really important part of these digital and asynchronous conversations.
Yeah, it's basically the holy grail, right? Better for the customer, better for the employee, and it's cheaper. Win, win, win.
It's a total win. And the other thing I was going to tell you is, there are companies that are doing this really well today, especially going back to generations like millennials and Gen Z and stuff. There are a lot of companies that are digitally native. You take the Uber and DoorDashes and Postmates and Facebooks and
all the most
companies that
successful,
began-
biggest, most valuable companies.
exactly. And exactly. And you take these companies that are digitally native, they already are doing asynchronous. They're already 80 or 90% digital. It's really these older companies that are, that have had the overhead of building all of these traditional ways in building customer experiences that are now transitioning. And we know when you have big transitions like this, it's tricky for companies that were so successful earlier. How do they do it? So there's definitely good examples of doing this well, but for most of the big companies that have been around for a while, they've got to figure out how to make this transition to asynchronous.
Yeah, I guess it's the whole kind of challenge with transformation, isn't it? Time, cost, complexity, leadership. But it sounds like this is a really great way to solve a lot of problems for customers, employees, and your business in order to catch up. And my only other reflection really on that was how many times I get stuck waiting on a chat with my broadband provider or my mobile phone provider, and the chat window will shut and they disappear. So for me, even just as a customer myself, like I think this is like the next evolution of meeting customers where they want to be met. It's also meeting them in the space and time that they also want to be met, not just a channel. So yeah, I think this sounds really, really awesome.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And I think that's one of the interesting things you can do when you use technologies like ASAPP to make agents more productive and to deliver better experiences in channels like we're talking about. It also, when you have greater productivity or greater efficiency, you can do things like increase your hours of operation. I mean, in my opinion, every CX practitioner that's running a digital business should aim to have 24/7, coverage on digital channels. Well, that's expensive and hard to do. But if your agents can be twice as productive, it suddenly you can eliminate agents, or you can just increase your hours of operation, or both. And so there's a lot of leverage you can pull to improve the experience. The challenge that you mentioned also with, like talking to your cell provider is that, when you're dealing with synchronous digital experiences, you often will. What do we do with our smartphones? We multitask, and so we might be off doing something else, and we come back and they disconnected us because we weren't able to respond within a certain number of minutes. So again, this goes back to the power of the customer experience in async.
Yeah, my record was 3 hours and 8 agents trying to sort out a relatively simple problem. So it sounds absolutely wonderful to me as a customer myself. So I can't wait to see more of it. So just to finish up, where can our audience find out more about ASAPP?
Yeah, so anyone who's interested can go to asapp.com. It is a relatively new company. We have a lot of really big customers with really big challenges in contact centers and CX, and it's a great place to learn more and to learn about some of our customers and some of the work we're doing. And we aren't really this small widget that's making your business 10% better. It is sort of using AI and machine learning to transform any industry is a huge undertaking, and we have this awesome way in which we engage customers to help them. So asapp.com.
ASAPP.com. Awesome. And that's it from us. And thank you so much, Michael. It's been wonderful to talk to you today. I've really enjoyed it. I've really learned a lot, and I feel very hopeful about the future of CX now. So just to the audience, if you've enjoyed today's session, please do give us a quick like or share this on social media, as it's so much appreciated. I'm Clare Muscutt from UC Today. Thanks for watching.